and welcome to another episode of Naked at the Top. Today I am joined by Andy Rooke. Andy, how are you?
Fantastic. For a Friday morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, wintry day outside in Melbourne. But looking forward to having the chat.
Yeah, great to have you here. Could you just start, Andy, by just introducing yourself and what you do?
So what I do at the moment is my main business is I help set up and run advisory boards for private businesses, giving them a sense of strategy and clarity, focus, and accountability. So through the regular interactions with them. I also do executive coaching. I have a number of CEOs and managing directors and C-suite people, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, England, that I catch up on a regular basis as well. All different people, different industries.
Oh, amazing. So what do you call yourself then? If I had to get you to tell me your job title, what would you call yourself?
Yeah, sounds like a dinner party. My wife says, I don't know what he does either. It's an issue. Look, certainly my predominant business and my absolute real passion is I suppose a board, advisory board chair and mentor. And there's obviously smaller businesses where it's just me. You are really doing the mentoring, coaching piece. So to be honest, it's really more. I'm probably more attuned with just being a founder of a business. I think that's the one that I kind of like, because it other than just being the title, but it's that's a hard game, being a founder of a business. And as you know, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners know, it can be your proudest achievement despite a proper title.
Yeah, absolutely. It is hard. And what would you say for yourself personally? What's the hardest part of being a founder?
It's a great question, and this is where I suppose I play a role for people. And I'm always honest enough to say I'm not impervious to myself, but there's a certain there's a bit of a loneliness about it. I think there's not many people you can often talk to about it. Other founders get it, but a lot of other people who haven't been on that journey and kind of, I'm not saying I've risked everything to do it, but certainly, you do jump off and have to swim frantically. So I think there's that part to it. There's always a bit of a lack of security about the money until you get to a certain stage. And again, I'm not saying that I'm not impervious to that either, sort of thing. And, when you lose a couple of clients, there's always a bit of a clutch sort of in your chest. And which happens, you just haven't got that security of income and tenure that you have with a business. So I think, it's more of the risk, I think, that you're taking, backing yourself.
Yeah.
The fallibilities and some of the self-talk that can come with that.
But counter to that risk is that is the scary part, but it actually then becomes the most rewarding part. Like I've found for myself, like, oh, this is so scary. But then when you work at it, you become more proud because you've taken that risk as well.
Oh, look, absolutely. New coaching client just catching up the other day, and they've been 20 years working in one business in one industry, and they've gone out in their own, albeit the same industry. But we're just talking about the difference of mindset between being an employee and being a business owner or founder. And and the upside is massive because you're operating on a much, if you look at a sine wave, that the highs are higher, the lows are lower, as opposed to when you're an employee, it's in a much narrower band, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to just go back in time a little bit, because I know that you've had many roles and done many things. So could you just take us back to where you started and how you've grown to where you are now?
Look, I'll try and keep it short because it's I've done a lot of things and experimented with lots of things and tried lots of things in my career, but really trying to sort of not use too much time on the podcast is originally did a Bachelor of Business in Melbourne, and so missed out on marketing, which was my dream, and got into Bachelor of Business. So I became an accountant and ended up in the accounting realm, which I'm forever grateful for. It absolutely has given me the foundational understanding of running businesses that is so critical to what I do now. I didn't know that at the time, obviously, but I was pretty good at it. I'm not I'm not very great with detail, but I actually enjoyed understanding a bit more about businesses and what makes them tick and how to make them successful.
Mm.
Morphed into to marketing and then into general management at an early age. So I was running a company called Ski Wanderers here in Melbourne at the age of, I don't know, it must have been 26, 27 or whatever it was for 5 years. So I was managing a number of people in offices, and we had a couple of lodges in the Victorian mountains.
Mm.
So that was a really early taste of professionally of leading people. Then again, keeping it short, moved to Sydney, took on a couple of different jobs in marketing, back into finance, into marketing, and in a whole range of different industries, all shortish term, 1-2 years, which was often seen as a real undoing of a career person back then.
Mm.
We've changed massively, but if I ever spoke to a recruiter and they'd look and I'd see I'd had 5 jobs in maybe 10 years, it was always a real red flag for them. Now, if you didn't have 5 jobs in 10 years, they'd think you were stale, or weren't progressing your career fast enough.
I'll have to tell my husband he's been in his job for 10 years. I'll let him know.
Yeah. And then a bit of a change of events. We moved out to Mudgee, to central New South Wales, and moved out there. We bought a business. My wife and I had a business in Sydney, which she successfully ran most of it. We bought another one in Mudgee in central New South Wales. By sheer dint of good fortune, after a year, I was living and working in Sydney and coming out on weekends. Got to start back in a finance role. So it's gone forward and backwards a few times. Back in a finance role, commercial role, with one of the open cut coal mines out there. Led to an opportunity to go to a brand new greenfield site. A couple of years of doing commercial there, and then one of my prouder moments in my career, I got elevated to be the general manager of the mine. It was the first non-mining engineer ever to be appointed a manager of a coal mine within the Tees Group, and they had a lot of managers and a lot of mines, and did that for a couple of years. Then left and became the CEO of what was a family business of Mitre 10 stores, now the largest in New South Wales.
Mm-hmm.
Did that for a couple of years as a CEO added, I think, 6 stores to the network and all sorts of things. Then one of my mentors offered me an opportunity to go to work embedded within BHP Iron Ore in the Pilbara and lead a team of 10 coaches, which kind of appealed to me, just to sort of do something back in mining, but radically different. And for 2 years, almost exclusively, I was embedded within BHP Iron Ore in the Pilbara with 10 coaches all across Western Australia working for me, plus me doing some coaching myself. Yeah, living in mining camps and working with people and seeing some inside of workings of one of the largest companies in Australia. And that they then picked me out of that and dropped me into BHP Coal for another 2 years in Queensland. And at that stage, I was getting this idea more so about pursuing the coaching. Went off and got some other coaching qualifications, International Coaching Federation qualifications. Started then morphing more into coaching, and then met a guy with the same last name as me, Michael Rooke, who offered me an opportunity to work with him on coaching and also building and running leadership programs for a number of businesses. And so I then morphed into becoming a leadership development and facilitator. And so I spent a lot of time embedded in Xero, both Australia and New Zealand, and a bit in Singapore. We built leadership programs and ran leadership programs, and then also for some of the major infrastructure projects in New South Wales and Victoria. And then the kernel of the idea came up about advisory boards, businesses.
Nice.
How we could actually get all the experience and knowledge from retired and semi-retired people, and how we could pair that up with private business owners to accelerate and supercharge their drive to reaching their potential. And then so for the last 5 years, that's been my real mission and passion and purpose, is doing that. So
yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Quite a career history, and
it leaves, and not that I'd have to deal with recruiters anymore, but you can imagine some recruiter just, their head exploding and looking at that and going, I don't know what we do with you.
And well, again, my husband's a recruiter, so
I see.
I'll talk to him about you. So we've got something in common. So I worked in the mining industry. I worked in manufacturing, sold into the mining industry. So what was it about the coal mine that drew you to that?
Look, the funny thing is, I wouldn't have 2 years, a year prior to working out at the mine, as late as that. So I was in my mid 40s, or thereabouts. I had never set foot in a coal mine in my life. I'd been on a school trip to one in Victoria. It didn't have any resonance for me whatsoever. It was like most of my career. It's really been about going into businesses and industries and immersing myself in them and challenging myself to find out how they work. What are the levers? What are the triggers? What's the culture? How can I either make it successful or contribute to that success? So it's the puzzle and the gamification of business, I think, is what really interests me and excites me.
Yeah.
It wasn't the coal mine. It wasn't coal mining as such. I'm not passionate about mining. I'm not pro or anti mining. I'm not passionate about mining, but just going to something completely different from what I've done and just immersing myself in it and learning it and and not conquering it, but try to really, really understand and bring some different thinking to it.
Mm, that's amazing. And the coaching side of it that you did for BHP, what were some of the things that you went through in coaching?
For most people in BHP, in terms of collectively, some of the smartest people and the smartest company you'd ever want to see in terms of they pick the best talent for around the world and in Australia. They get to pick the creme de la creme of all the uni graduates and anyone else who wants to go and join them. What it was doing was actually taking people and working with people with massively high IQ and trying to develop their EQ, which was usually much lower than the general population. They're not being derogatory, but because they're such high IQ people, they weren't so good in the EQ. And explaining to some people yesterday, I was drawing some diagrams in a disc profile session and saying the reason that BHP struggled for engagement is because they had a lot of incredibly high, intelligent IQ, logic focused people, but they weren't people focused. They didn't gravitate towards understanding and about how to engage and lead teams and deliver back to their staff what the staff really needed to supercharge them in being high performers.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So how long were you there for? A few years?
2 years embedded. Like I was doing fly in, fly out. I'd spend 3 weeks pretty much in Western Australia, a couple of different mine sites. And then I'd come home to Mudgee for a week or 10 days and then go back again. It was very intense. And every day was a 12, 14-hour day. You're living in a mining camp. You're up at 4:30 in the morning. You're on site before 6. And sometimes I'd change it around. For night shift people, I'd work a night shift with them. So I'd come in at 6 and work till 6 in the morning with them just to sort of get the people. And also it's a different flavour at night time.
Yes.
So you've got to understand and work with people where they are in the different environments to help them get better about it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's pretty intense. So was it then you had the chance encounter with Michael to do something? Were you just like, yep, I'm ready for something different now?
Yeah, I've been developing coaching and leadership go hand in hand. I mean, and certainly I'd been doing some bits and pieces there, but it was really along the way. And up till now, I still heavily immerse myself in the field of neuroscience. So I've got a neuroscience coaching qualification as well, and so I was really my passion was to try and help people understand more about their brain and their behaviour and how the two are linked, and then. So Michael allowed me to have a lot of input into our programs to put that in, and then drawing on some of his knowledge and experience around some of the cognitive behaviour theory, some elements of psychology, and then just some of the normal streams of leadership. But because I've done it and I've lived it and I've seen it, I'm able to give some much more real life examples and insights about what and how it. It plays out in the real world as opposed to sort of, textbook consultants who probably have never led teams before in some fairly trying circumstances.
Yeah, yeah. I think that definitely helps because then you can also meet them where they are. And I think it's really hard to take advice from someone that may not have lived what you're living. It's like, okay, yeah, you got the theory, but have you actually done it? So I think that's so powerful as well to be able to bring. Yeah, yeah,
And that's, I probably should market that a bit more about myself, in all honesty. But yeah, I mean, that's when people do engage me, one of the things they say is we want to work with someone who has experienced all these things. And, because you're not there to completely sort of say, here's my experience, but you can empathize with them probably more closely and just connect with them better because you kind of understand their environment and also there maybe some of the emotions that are coming up for them.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So tell me a bit more about the moment the idea sparked for your advisory company, because we sat together at a table at networking, and when you explained, and I think I wrote it in a newsletter, because when you explained what your business does, I was like, that's different. It stands out. The fact you've got retirees on an advisory board. So can you take me back to the moment that idea started to come to fruition?
Yeah, look, it's funny, and it'd be interesting. People who are listening to this as founders, when you have an idea and you can, briefly articulate it, and you get really positive responses, it really fuels you to keep going. And I can't remember if it was a conversation with you or someone else, but they said if you tell 5 people your idea, 5 people you trust and know, and they go, "Wow, that's a great idea," stick with it. But if those 5 people are kind of lukewarm about it, you maybe haven't got something that's really hitting the mark. So I originally had in the initial stages, I had a business partner in Queensland, a friend of mine who actually had this advisory board idea where he used to every 3 or 6 months get 2 or 3 people in over lunch, tell them a bit about their business, and they'd just give some ideas. And I'd been thinking about the same thing. And so we started just trying to sort of develop a more formalized model for it based on I had some private business that I was doing mentoring and coaching for.
Mm,
And then the idea came up because a few of my friends had been are very successful and had built up and sold businesses, made lots of millions of dollars. Some of them had been very successful C-suite people. And the message I was getting from them is, I'm bored. Like I've achieved a lot. I've got a lot of money, but I'm bored. And they own pubs, they own racehorses, but they'd kind of lost a bit of their purpose and meaning. And, I'm 60 now and I could sort of see how that might impact them. And so I started thinking, well, why don't I try and get some of those people to be involved with some of my clients? And the initial marketing pitch was, we'll bring 100 years of experience into your boardroom.
mm,
Now, that seemed to sort of resonate quite well with people. And then we started experimenting and getting some of them going. And I did a trial one in Mudgee, where I got 2 senior business people in Mudgee to join in as one of my clients. So I could just immediately see the uplift in input, and also sparking inspiration and ideas for the business owners. And so from then onwards, I've been on this crusade to do it. And so I love it when I can get that mix of right people with business owners who have got the mindset to know that bringing other people in is really a benefit. And look, I won't say it's exploded. I've got about 15 advisory boards going at the moment, sort of thing. Some of which are just much smaller businesses, only me, but we've got half a dozen with other advisors on them. But there's just a richness to add to the conversations, and the people who've got those advisory boards, the broader ones, just absolutely love it.
yeah, I bet, because it's bringing in different thinking, different experience. It must be fantastic for the people that are getting to use it. What for you, for the businesses that you mentor and bring advisory boards on, what would you say is one of the most common problems for smaller businesses?
If I was to distill it down, there's always a risk when you try to sort of distill a big question down to 2 simple responses. The first one is, most founders of businesses and owners of businesses, that's all they know. They're working really hard for 20 years in their business, and they've grown from sole operator to partners to other people to employees, and maybe it's got to a reasonable size. But they've never lived another life. They've never seen other businesses. They've never seen other industry systems, cultures. backgrounds. And so what we can do is we can bring all of that real life experience in and help share a whole range of different ideas of how different industries and businesses have and are dealing with similar problems.
Mhm.
The second one is, again, most of those business owners are often stuck in the short-termism of their business, and they are looking a week ahead, or maybe a month ahead if lucky, and they don't have potentially a really clear, articulated vision and strategy, and even tactical actions, and then that accountability that comes with it. And so bringing that to people, and dragging them every month out of their business to stop focusing on their emails and taking them to what's it look like in 6 or 12 months? How are we still on track? What do we need to consider? Where's the icebergs? Where's the opportunities? What are the puzzles that the business faces at the moment? And being able to get them to slow themselves down and consider and think with some other different inputs what might be an improved, better way through the jungle than what they're doing at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes you can get really stuck. Like if it's just you or even just a team, but you're just plugged away, putting out fires, you can get really stuck. But being able to zoom out, but with experienced people across different industries, it must give great ideas to be able to sometimes move in a different direction than what they'd even imagined. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I say, we're just thinking partners, because as an
Mm.
advisory, you don't make decisions. It's not like a
Yeah.
corporate board where we're there for the shareholders. We're there, in this case, for the owners, to help partner with them in their thinking so they
Mm.
can actually make better decisions. Now, whether they choose to agree with us or not is less relevant than the fact that they hopefully make some better decisions, because they've taken time, they've got some different ideas, it's sparked maybe some different imagination for them.
Yeah. Could you share a story? You don't have to name them, obviously, but share a story of
Yeah.
a business owner who's really turned a corner after working with a advisory board.
Look, in terms of turning a corner, is, again, probably gives too much kudos to the advisory board, because look, a long-term client down here, I'm happy to name them because it's been such a great involvement, engagement for 6 years. Business called Good Constructions here in
Mhm.
Melbourne. So when we first got introduced to Jolly and Jane, who are the owners, they were doing, at that stage, high-end renovations on housing, $1-2 million for, up and down maybe the southern part of Melbourne.
Mhm.
And so they'd been given an opportunity to go into start refurbishing some retirement living villages, which is a very different way of running their business, from 18-month project to a 10-week turnaround, lower end, low skill. Anyway, they just wanted to sort of explore it and work it out. So we sat down with them. They got a client. They were able to build some early wins with it. But then all of a sudden, it looked like it was going to be a really good business opportunity. So we worked with them in the early stages to help them get to that first stage, and then to say, well, this looks like it's got legs. How do we do that to the stage where, how do we drop the renovation part of the business and clear that away? The landscaping side of the business, let's clear that away. Let's really focus now on becoming a retirement living specialist. And 6-7 years later, the business has grown in terms of size eightfold, in terms of revenue,
Wow.
and in terms of employees probably tenfold,
Wow.
and is now operating in Port Macquarie, Newcastle, Sydney, large swathes of Melbourne. Will go into Queensland and potentially even to New Zealand in the next 2 to 3 years. Now, that, with what they knew, it would have, they probably could have, they may have got there, they may not have, but we were able to accelerate, hopefully their path through that by bringing some more governance stuff, accountability, certainly some more strategic focus for them, helping them, just supporting them through. Again, we talked about the doubts, the ups and downs,
Yeah.
things. It hasn't all been smooth sailing, and as you'd expect, but yeah, it giving them that non-judgmental sanctuary every month to have a 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours working on their business.
That's amazing, amazing results. What for the listeners, what advice would you get? Because I'm sure a lot of people are going to listen to this and think, "Oh, that sounds amazing. How do I do something like this?" So,
Yeah.
aside from working with you, of course, Andy, but
Yeah.
what advice would you give to people to help them to come out of the weeds and think outside the box? You know, if maybe they can't get an advisory board for whatever reason, like what can us founders do to start thinking of
Um, there's two parts to it. I think the first is you've got to embrace the mindset that I can't get there on my own. Now, we all, I think, see that as a bit of a knock or a dent on our ego or our pride. They think, oh, I should be able to do this. I shouldn't need help. I can be good enough to get through this. But the reality is none of us are. None of us as sole individuals can be successful, as a little single amoeba floating around and actually expand rapidly. We need to actually engage with other people, bring people into our confidence, and hopefully, be humble enough and vulnerable enough to say, look, I don't know this. I don't know this. I need help with this. They're the business owners that flourish and reach their full potential. I think it's a generalization quicker and with less bumps, bruises, and scrapes.
Mhm,
Um, that's the first thing. The second thing is I'd be willing to be held accountable for it. So have some plans.
mhm,
Most people have got dreams. Most people have got a vision for what it'd be like, but be willing to write them down and commit to them and be willing to be held accountable to them in a respectful way to say, you said you were going to do this. You're now doing this. What's going on for you? This is what you really wanted. Well, what's the distractions? How do we get rid of this then? How do we get back on track? And
mhm.
accepting that that's again, part of high human performance is getting the feedback, being held accountable to someone or group of
Yes.
people, making some public commitments, and then being able to sort of keep adjusting in pursuit of the dream.
Accountability is massive, isn't it? Being able to, and what I find since I've started the business is having peers. So, friends that also run businesses that might be just a few steps ahead of me and having conversations. Oh, what would you do? And this, and, back and forth like that. But accountability is huge as well. It's the same in fitness. If you have a fitness goal, the best way to get there is get a coach and
Yeah.
tell them your goals and have them saying to you, why are you not at the gym? Where have you been? It does make a difference.
It's a weird anomaly where we look at every high performing sports person, which is they're usually most public, but I think you'd find most high performing professions, the high performers and down to a much lower level would have some support network and coach. Yet we feel in business for some reason that we can get by without that. Now, you look at every high performer in business and irrespective of whether I'm working with them or not, but invariably they've got some support network and coach around them, mentor they're relying upon. So that's, I get it. If you acknowledge and embrace that that's what high performers do and you feel that, and you're willing to replicate that, you've got a much greater success of doing it. The other one's the accountability one. It's interesting because every year I interview and do a wrap up with all the clients and get feedback. And the one thing that surprised me initially was that everyone values the accountability more than the fact that they actually thought when they were signing up for it.
Okay,
Because
right.
we all think our willpower is that thick, where it's actually our willpower is only about it's wafer thin. We need the accountability because to push through all those periods of time we go, oh look, I can get away with this because no one's watching.
Yes.
I was going to run a marathon, but I didn't write it down, didn't tell anyone, so I can push that to one side. Whereas if you make a public proclamation that I'm going to do this or this is what we're going to do, and then you've got people holding your account, your ability to follow through and nail it is yeah, many, many multiples higher.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'd love to just go dig into your personal life in a bit more detail. That sounded a bit weird. Um, but just in terms of because I obviously we've spoken a few times, and you've done some pretty interesting things. Like, can you tell us about some of your travels and where you've been and what you've done, what your hobbies are? Because it's I think yeah, it's people wouldn't expect it.
It's an interesting, and I haven't been able to nail where this comes from, but I see it in my son as well. So I've got a 26-year-old daughter and almost 24-year-old son, and you're always looking at your kids. I know you've got kids. You're always looking to say who's got what, which DNA are they hitting upon here, sort of thing. And the good ones are always mine, and the bad ones are obviously always my wife. But ever since I was quite young, I've always been wanting to push myself out of my comfort zone repeatedly, and that's gone to travel as well. And going to different places and seeing different things. So, at the age of, I finished uni, and 3 days after I finished uni back in the early 80s, I had a 1970 Hillman Hunter, shitty old car, cost me a couple $100, and I headed off around Australia on my own, just to sort of explore and sort of see what was going on with the world. And, had some, drove up and all the way through and ended up living and working on Lindeman Island in the Whitsundays and managing all the bars up there. Then went across to Alice Springs and managed a new hotel opening and bars over there and things. And it was just that, I think that push to keep striving, just sort of out of your comfort zone. What's around the next corner? What's going on? And to get back to the nub of the question is, it's still there today. So, I've been to and done photography in Iran. So I spent a couple of weeks in Iran. Obviously, it's in 2019 when the country, before COVID, before it closed down. I have been to India a couple of times doing street photography in India, and just taking myself off to different places and just mixing with the locals and understanding and trying to connect with them. And the photography is not the absolute reason for it. The photography is a bit of a tool, I think, that forces you to do that. Been to Oman back in the days when I was living overseas. I travelled right out to the Syrian border in Turkey. Just taking buses and things like that. Travelled through Myanmar when it was open, and in some pretty rough conditions. Travelled through Laos again before it was really sort of touristy and things. So it's all those. There's probably a couple more. Don't know.
What is it about those areas that attracts you? Is that you want to go and explore? There's some of those areas you'd imagine a lot of people, but I don't even want to go there. What is it that draws you to those areas?
I think it's also, and conversation from dinner 2 weeks ago, I think it's also trying to see those people and places in their, call it natural, but less diluted through the impacts of tourism and Western society to some extent, and trying to. There's very few places in the world you can probably go now and actually see, getting a feel or an encapsulation of other people's lives that isn't sort of polluted or sold out to some way in tourism or other now infecting it. And that's what it's always been for me. I have no doubt you could go to parts of Africa and probably South America and get some of that still. I haven't done that. My travels so far, but yeah, And there's an element then of winging it and making it up. And, I haven't had no major danger experience, life-threatening experiences, a few close shaves. But yeah, and I think that's the other thing. It's a bit of the adrenaline part about off the beaten track, round the next corner. What am I going to find? And that's where most of the rewards are, whether it's photography or anything else. It's getting off the main path.
And what is it about photography? Does that help you, connect with the locals in a way? And how have you felt that experience connecting with locals?
And look, it does. I think photography is a bit like you get one or two good photos. So the definition of a professional photographer versus amateur is an amateur photographer takes 1,000 photos and makes you sit through every single one. And a professional photographer takes 1,000 photos and only shows you one photo, and you go, wow, aren't they great? Whereas the reality is they're smart enough to know that the other 999 were garbage. But I think it's part of it's the thrill of the trophy, getting that one great photo and say, hey, I from an artistic, creative point of view, I captured that scene, that person, whatever. And it's a really great replication of it. Not for the kudos. I don't like showing my photos, but just for the fact all the bits and pieces of the learnings of photography all came together in that one photo. A bit like when you cook a meal, all different ingredients, all married up beautifully, and look what I've got. So it's that, but I think the photography also can just be, can be an icebreaker, because I'd often find myself showing photos of home. sitting up near the Iraqi border, up in a remote village, talking to two old guys through an interpreter, showing them photos of my home in Australia. It's still one of my most rewarding experiences. And then laughing and poking, and us just not having any common language together, but laughing and poking at these photos. And then me being able to take photos of them while they're laughing and in a natural
Mhm.
right, is one of my cherished photos I have on my wall outside of my office, sort of thing, because it was just, that they are being normal humans in a different part of the world. And it's, and the photos are just, they're a trigger of a moment in time.
Yeah, it'll help you remember, it'll take you back to
Yeah,
that memory, yeah. And
very
it's
much.
amazing how we can actually connect without even being able to speak the same language, being able
Yeah.
to like what you did. So how do you intriguing for me, how do you start that conversation with locals that don't know the same language? Like how do you approach that?
Never with a camera out front.
Yeah.
But it does, because although a lot of the nationalities in the subcontinent things actually like having their photos taken, the worst thing you can do is walk around and start putting a lens in people's faces. So it actually forces you to engage with them and actually genuinely get to their level and have a chat. And then if you're doing that, and then they know you're doing some photos, is maybe showing them some other photos of other people, or maybe even politely asking if you can take photos, because obviously in some cultures, Iran, you can't photograph females, and nor should you be, and even children's off limits in just about all countries. And then actually taking some photos and showing them, because they don't often get to maybe see photos of themselves and their friends, and then having a laugh about it, and just building a relationship over that connection point. I just enjoy wandering around the slums of Mumbai, for example, or the fish markets, and just having the
Mm.
laughter, watching the people, and trying to engage with them to some extent without trying to impose yourself. And here's a quick photo. I've got what I need, and I'm out of here.
Yeah, yeah. So really immersing yourself in their life and their
Yeah,
world.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what a lot of the business owners I'm speaking to for this podcast, so I'm trying to look at trends and what I'm
Mm.
seeing in all the CEOs and leaders. One of the main things that keeps coming out is the ability to have fun. Like many of them are just like you've got to have fun. I think one guy said, "If you're not having fun, what are you doing?" So how do you see that? Like, how do you bring fun into your daily life, and do you see it as being an important part of business as well?
Look, it's an important part of business. The word fun can often seem frivolous, and there's some really progressive companies, or maybe certainly off-center companies, will have fun as a value, which I think is brilliant, because it then frees people up to know that you can enjoy themselves. It's a real challenge though, for business owners, to work out what's fun, and what's the difference between fun, lack of performance, or lack of accountability and things. And it's a really complex question, I suppose, and every culture will have it differently. But culture and values are very much leader led. So if the leader goes in there in a stern and serious way every day, and the shadow they cast over the business is of that, call it negativity sort of approach, or negative approach, no one's going to leap over the leader and have fun, and no one's going to be. It just seems it's completely out of sync with it's not even a trickle down effect, but the impact the leader's creating. So it all starts with the leader. You see, and you deal with organisations where the leader is allowing themselves to have fun. It then becomes permissible. So you can't codify it. You can, I suppose, articulate it as a value, but it's all very much observable behavior from the leader, who is either by default giving permission to have fun and showing that it's okay to have fun, or not. That would be my unconsidered answer to it.
Yeah, and of the ones that I've spoken to, it's they take themselves seriously, but not, if that makes sense. They're not afraid to have a joke and have a laugh, and for people to, challenge what they say as well. So they're all very open. I guess for me, how do you, Andy, have fun? How do you bring fun into your everyday?
Well, look, I try to. There's some clients who appreciate it more than others. There's some clients you feel more comfortable being, maybe making some comments. I just got off a coaching session this morning with a guy in New Zealand I've been working with for 3 or 4 years. We can have fun from a coaching point of view, and we can have a bit of fun about different things. But there's some people who they would see fun as not being professional and as being able to judge those different ones. I mean, the more you get to know people, I think people, when you can have fun with them, usually lighten up and you get a bit more out of it. It's a bit better. It's not quite so stiff and regimented. But you've kind of got to earn that respect, and you've got to grow that relationship until you do it. And particularly, when they're paying you, for a certain service, and to come in and start having fun straight away, it might not seem like a great, what they're expecting out of it.
Yeah. Great. Well, it's been a really good conversation, Andy. We're coming towards the end. I always do like a quick fire round.
Oh, I can think.
Yeah.
Righto.
So you gotta think quick. All right. So, what was the last thing you asked ChatGPT?
The last thing I asked ChatGPT was to write me to summarize a webinar that I'm giving in a couple of weeks' time into a concise marketing pitch for people who are interested about advisory boards and strategy, which I did just yesterday.
Perfect. How did it go? Did
yeah,
it
good. The person who's hosting it, I said it to them last night. They said, yeah, that's better than what we had. They'd used ChatGPT already to send me something, and I just took it and just gave it a slightly different bent.
Yeah. Perfect. What time were you up this morning?
6:30 this morning. Yeah, normally between 5:30 and 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, I you noticed from your form you're an early riser. What's the first thing you do when you get up early?
Look, I try to. The first thing's obviously to stand up. I'm not a coffee drinker or anything, but I try to regularly have exercise in my life. So a couple of mornings a week, I like to go for a run or go to the gym. And being a morning person, I like to get there down 6 o'clock in the morning, and that sort of gives me the dopamine and adrenaline hit for the day.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Last thing that made you laugh out loud?
I think last thing, I went to, I had a dinner with a whole lot of parents of my son at school a couple of weeks ago, and they're all farmers, and we're up in Newcastle at a big dinner, and we were laughing about how they used to be in the drought when my son was at school, and now they've all got fat lambs that are $440 a head, and they got to pick up the bill now, and we had 14 of us, and we're taking over the restaurant laughing and throwing out all sorts of different ideas around about why farmers are actually really rich and wealthy. Completely untrue, but it was funny because it was just, it was we were just taking the piss out of the whole fact. They're always seen as downtrodden and poor.
Yeah. What's a habit or hack that's saved you in the last year?
A habit?
Habits, yeah.
That saved me in the last year. A habit. I think one of them is I write everything down. I have lots going on, and I keep a big long list of all sorts of things I've got to do, because I don't think I've got ADHD, but lots of things flash through my head. So I'm always, right, I've got to write that down before I forget it. I've got to write that down before I forget it. Including sayings. I capture lots of sayings to share in coaching and mentoring sessions. And so if I see one, I immediately copy and paste it into my phone under my notes, so it doesn't get lost. Because if I mark things, I'll never go back to them.
Yeah. Nice. That's good you got them in your phone. I've got Post-it notes everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's played that game before, and it's crumbled.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, the last question I've got for you, Andy, I always like to do a parting question for the listeners. So almost a little gift to pass on. So if you could pass on one reminder to business owners that are listening, something that you've lived or just learned that you would like to give to them, what would it be?
You've got to have a really clear vision for where you're going to take your people on a journey. It's got to be really well communicated, and it's also having one or two metrics in it, so you know how you're making progress along that pathway. A vision without communication and strategy is hallucination, and hallucinations aren't really great planks to build a successful business on.
That's a fantastic sentence to end on. Thank you so much, Andy. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks for inviting me along to be part.